Now, this month is about building client-proof pages in Elementor. It's something I think most of us have probably experienced at some point. You kind of build a site, you hand it over, the client makes a small change, and somehow that ends up with a site broken or a layout broken or something broken. And it's up to you to fix it. If this has happened plenty of times to me over the years, absolutely. And what I've realized is it's usually not the client doing anything wrong. It's the way that the site's generally put together. So what I wanted to explore tonight is how we design Elementor pages so that they actually survive some real world editing. So this isn't about locking things down or stopping clients from using their site. It's more about just giving them a safer way to use it without breaking the layout every time they touch it. Or at least that's what it feels like sometimes for us to go in and fix it afterwards. So I'll show you a practical workflow that I use on most of my projects that works in Elementor, but it also applies to other setups as well. So let's jump in. So you hand over a site to a client, they log in, make a small change, and maybe update a heading, swap out some text, and then something shifts. The spacing looks a bit off, a section wraps in a weird way, maybe something drops out of alignment completely. They haven't really done anything unusual. From their point of view, they just went in and updated something that needed to be updated. They've just used the editor in the way that it appears to be used. And now you, the freelancer, are back in fixing something that felt like it should have been completely safe. This happens an awful lot of the time. And it's easy to think it's just one of those things. And I've been in plenty of discussions with freelancers where they've talked about this, and you feel this, you hear this sigh in the voice and the shoulders sag. It's just one of those things of using page builders, but actually, it shouldn't be. This kind of error, this kind of breakage, this kind of shifting, it's very predictable. So what I want to show you tonight is that this isn't just a random thing. It's the results mostly of how pages are built in the first place. So it's very easy to think and look at this and think that the client just broke the layout. That's our first instinct. But in most cases, they're just doing what the interface allows them to do. And in Elementor, it allows them to do anything. They log in, they see text fields, images, spacing controls, the complete works, and they probably assume that it's all safe to change, or in Australia, you like to say, have a fair go, because, why wouldn't it be? Clients aren't thinking in containers or layout systems. They're not thinking about structure or nesting or responsive behavior that we think about when we're designing the site. They're interacting with what is visible on the screen, what they can click on, what they can move, nothing else. And if it looks editable, it feels safe, and they'll have a fair go at doing something. And that's usually when something breaks. It's usually not because the client did something wrong. It's because the page was a bit too flexible for them to do something or everything in the first place. So if it looks editable, clients will probably assume that it's a safe thing to change. Otherwise, why would it be there? So one of the reasons that this keeps happening is that Elementor hasn't really given us any way to lock things down structurally. There's no, without using add-ons, there's no built-in way to prevent someone from deleting a section or moving things around or changing layout settings. Everything is essentially editable and open. And that's how the Elementor web builder has been designed. Now, this is where things are starting to shift a bit in the upcoming version 4 editor. Elementor are introducing something called components, and with components, something called component properties, which basically means that you can start to define what parts of something are editable and what parts are fixed. Now, there's not a lot of information in this just now. It's very much work in progress, and it's not full Gutenberg type block locking level. So instead of locking a layout completely, it's more about controlling what the user can interact with, what's editable and what's not. But I've got to say this is still evolving. This whole thing's still in beta. But again, even if that comes in to play and we can use that, it still doesn't remove the need for how we structure things when we're building websites today. So the natural response to all of this is to try and explain things to the client, right? We record a Loom video, we write up some instructions, maybe a checklist or a handover document. And for that particular moment, it feels like that solves the problem. But in reality, as you know, most clients never watch the video again. They hardly go back to the documentation. And even if they do, they're actually making decisions while they're inside the editor, not inside your instructions. So they might be overwhelmed with the UI and completely forget whatever you've written down, especially the big red bold paragraph that says, whatever you do, do not click on this. And of course they do. So the problem isn't a lack of explanation. We've got the videos, we've got the document. It's that the system still allows unsafe actions at the end of the day. So what tends to work much better, I feel, is designing a page so that the safe action is the obvious action to do. So instead of telling clients what not to do, don't touch this, don't click on that, whatever you do, do not do this. Instead of doing that, we make it harder for them to do the wrong thing in the first place, because what they see on the screen is obvious in where and what they need to edit. One of the biggest contributors to fragile layouts is the complexity in the structure. And I talked about this last month. We were talking about flexible layouts. With Elementor, but with any site builder, it's easy to get lots of nested containers, different directions stacked inside each other, custom spacing tweaks everywhere. Things that made sense while you were building it, but are not really obvious to anyone else. I think for me, the rule of thumb is the more complex the layout, the easier it is to break with a small change. A slightly longer heading, maybe a different image size, a bit of extra text, and suddenly that whole layout behaves a little bit differently than was expected. So one of the simplest things that you can do is to make your containers a bit more boring. That's the word I like to use, is boring. Fewer layers, more predictable patterns, consistent spacing across everything. And if you want to know how to do that, have a look at the YouTube video from last month's meetup. So a good rule of thumb in this is if you need to explain how a section works, it's probably already too complex for a client-facing page. I know I've seen some pretty big monsters in my time. You go in and there's one huge section, and then within that there's sections and controls, layouts within other things. So it does get a bit messy. And when you're a client, you're in there, you're in the moment, and the more complex, the more easier it is for them to be able to break it. So the key takeaway really for this one is simple, predictable layouts are far more resilient to client edits. So this is a shift that changes everything. Instead of giving clients a blank page, we give them a system to work with. Most issues start the moment the client starts staring at an empty canvas with full access to absolutely everything. Because now they're not just editing, they're actually designing. So the power of Elementor allows you to have a blank canvas and drag whatever you want and create anything. But that's also the downfall. When that client starts designing things, that's when systems start breaking, because we're the designers. We should be designing that and ensuring that the workflow and everything works properly. You give them free rein and things do start to drift. Like things like spacing changes, structure changes, inconsistencies start to creep in all over the place. And over time, that site becomes really much harder to maintain. So rather than trying to train clients to design well, what I find works is removing that responsibility altogether. So we don't give them a blank page, we give them pre-built structure that they can use safely. So this is what I actually use. This is how I implement client projects. I don't hand over a site and say, go ahead, go and build whatever you need, anything. Instead, I give them a very simple system to work within. There are essentially just 4 parts to it. First, there's a section library. It's a library page. This is a single place, or it could be multiple pages. It's usually a single place that contains all the approved sections that they could use for the site. Second, if they need to build a page, then they copy sections from that library and paste them into the new page. Third, they only edit content. So we're talking about changing text, images, and colors. They're not redesigning the layouts at all. They're just copying and pasting it in and changing the context. And fourth, there's no free-form building. They're not starting from scratch. They're kind of more assembling pages from pre-built pieces. I think you'd probably call this patterns if you were thinking about Gutenberg. It's kind of pattern block. We still don't have that lock business, but we're just giving them a copy and paste container to paste in and change. So give clients a simple system to follow and don't let them do like a full design freedom. Of course, it's their website and they're happy to do that. But when you give them these things to copy and paste, this makes their life easier and it makes support life for us a lot easier as well, because we're not having to go in and modify things. So let's break down that first part, the section library page. This is just a normal page that sits in the website, but it's not part of the navigation. Clients don't land on it by accident. We can set it to private. It's then purely just set there as a working area. And so on this page, I place all the approved sections, containers for the site. So hero sections, feature blocks, call to actions, testimonials, social blocks, anything that when we've done the discovery up front and had a look at their existing website that they would be wanting to display on their website. Anything that might be reused across multiple pages. And each section, each container is already designed, styled, and structured. So instead of building something new, when the client just comes here, they find what they need, they right-click, copy the section, the container, and paste it into their own page. That's the entire interaction they have. They're not building. They're basically selecting, stacking, and reusing. And because everything on this page is controlled, the rest of the site stays nice and consistent. So this is what a library page might look like. Let's have a look at my other monitor. Yep, that's the right one. Just a simple page with a series of pre-built sections. I call them sections. I mean sections as in you'd have sections of a magazine, but I know they're called containers in Elementor. So just a series of pre-built sections, containers stacked on one another. You might have a hero section at the top, then feature sections, call to actions, testimonials, profiles, about sections. Each one is clearly laid out. Each one has a note attached to it, so the client can hover over and see what that's meant to be for. I give them context. Use this particular section when you're on this page or thinking about this information. And each one is clearly laid out, and it's easy to recognize because the clients can visually see that block. And it's like, right, that's exactly what I need to go with. Now, the key thing here is that every section, every container on this page is completely self-contained. So it doesn't rely on anything above or below it, and it doesn't assume a specific layout around it. They're completely self-contained containers that you can just drop in. So when a client copies one of these sections and pastes it into a new page, it just works. It works. And it's all been designed for layout on desktop, tablet, and mobile as well. And this isn't specific to Elementor. I've actually used this approach with other setups as well. I have another stack that I used to use, not so much now, but I used to use generate press and generate blocks. And this thing works the same. I just create a library of container, a library page with containers, they can copy and paste, and that works really well. It frees the client up, and they just visually pick whatever they want and then copy that onto the new page. So really, it's less about the tool. Really, it's more about giving clients a reliable set of building blocks to work with, and still having that flexibility of having a page builder. So once this type of system is in place, then training becomes really, really easy. I don't walk through the whole Elementor interface with clients anymore. I don't explain containers, spacing, or unit controls. I just teach them one thing: how to copy and paste a section. You right-click, copy, paste an image, edit the content. Done. So I show them where to change the text. I show them where to change the colors. And that's about it. Because everything that they need is already designed, and then that frees them up. They're not making layout decisions. It's all done for them. They're just basically using what's there. And that kind of removes a lot of the hesitation for them as well. It gives them more confidence that something's going to work, because they're not really worried about something breaking things, which is a big worry for clients when you hand over something like a page builder, because I think that freedom also comes with a little bit of worry and hesitation that they might muck something up along the lines. You can go even simpler, and I certainly have done this in past, certainly with the generate press and generate blocks. So a simplified version is, instead of copying sections, containers, I give them complete starter pages. So if they need a new page, they just basically duplicate one. I think Yoast has a duplicator. I think there's several plugins, and it just copies the whole thing out. And that gives them a whole page that already has all that structure, and it works because they're not changing, they're not designing the system. So you could have hero, content sections, call to actions, everything's just there, ready to go. And so what they do, they go in, they replace the text, they swap the images, they change the colors, they might move some sections up and down. That's easy enough to do. And that's really it. They're not assembling anything, they're not making layout and design choices, they're just updating content inside that existing structure. This is less flexible, but it's much, much safer for the clients and for us as freelancers who are maybe on a support contract for that. So for less technical clients or clients who won't update the site very often, this method is usually a better option. They can just see a bunch of pre-made pages, duplicate that, and then just edit it, change the URL, and that's it. Whereas maybe more marketing focused teams that need to build micro pages or landing pages or things, they might prefer to have a library of stuff that they can just drag in. But the key takeaway really is duplicating pre-built page is really the fastest way for clients to create new content. And that's what we're wanting. Now, Elementor has this notion of global versus normal, or sometimes they're called local templates. That's an important decision when you're building out these systems. When do you use global templates, and when do you keep things local within that particular page? Now, normal or local templates are generally the safest option. So you insert them into a page, and any changes only affect that one page. Global templates are a bit different. One change on that global template can affect multiple pages, sometimes the entire site, if we're talking about headers or footers or social blocks, things like that. So they are powerful. Global templates are very powerful, but they do come at a significant risk. A simpler way to think about it is, if something breaks, how far should that damage spread across the website? So just be a bit wary when you're thinking about providing global templates as part of this stack of library. If the answer is just one page, as in risk, then just use a normal template, just copy and paste a section, a container in. If it needs to be site-wide, then maybe it should be a global, but I think you need to highlight that risk and surface area to the client to say that, we change this one template here, and it will replicate across multiple pages and across the site. So if they don't need that, then I would definitely just stick with normal local normal templates rather than the global ones. So even with all this in place, things can still go wrong, of course. A section might get deleted. A client might update the library, thinking that it's going to update one of the pages. I've had that happen before. Content might be changed away that you didn't expect for when you designed the system. You could have catered for 2 lines of a heading, and maybe it stretches onto 3 or more for some reason. So something might still break. So the goal here isn't really to eliminate every possible issue that could happen. It's really just more a system to control how far that issue spreads. So when you're building, you're thinking about containment. If one section breaks, it should only affect that section. If one page has an issue, it shouldn't affect the whole site. So this is really where avoiding unnecessary global dependencies really, really helps. Keeping sections self-contained, not relying on other parts of the page to hold things together. So we shouldn't be using big sections, big containers as like control groups for multiple sections of the website, of a web page. Break it down, keep it simple, keep it blocked. So really, you're designing for failure, not just the ideal scenario. You're designing these components and sections to be flexible enough to take what the client can edit, text and visually, and that's it. That's it. So design pages so that issues are contained and don't spread across the entire website. What about fixing existing sites? The good news is you don't need to rebuild your sites to get most of these benefits. It's not a complete rebuild. A few small changes can make a big, big difference. The first one is replacing freeform sections with reusable ones. So if you've got pages where every section is slightly different, have a look at all the common measures and start standardizing them, and then use those templates to replace the current ones. Second, you might want to normalize your spacing and typography. So instead of one-off tweaks everywhere, try and use consistent values. This is where global styling really does help out here. So try and stop that urge of going into a container on a page and just adjusting the spacing a little bit because it looks a bit off. The reason it looks a bit off is because your global styling hasn't been set up properly for desktop or tablet or mobile. So go there first and make sure that works rather than tweaking things at individual container level. Third is remove unnecessary flexibility. So if a setting doesn't need to be changed, it probably shouldn't be updated. So we're talking about, again, spacing, containers, unit values, things like that. And you don't have to do everything at once. Even applying 1 or 2 of these steps is going to reduce how often layouts break. A little bit more about Elementor 4. Version 4 is a meaningful shift in how the editor works. It actually supports this method that we've been talking about. It introduces a more structured way of building web pages using components instead of more kind of free-form standing containers. And with that comes the idea of defining what's actually editable within these components. I'm really excited to see this. I think it's going to be a really interesting approach. I think it's going to be a safer approach. So this is generally what we've been talking about tonight, is that you define the structure, the layout, and then you lock that. You'll be able to lock those things so that when the client comes in with their predefined user role, then they can only touch the bits that you've marked as editable. So that would be things like a hero section's title, the background color, the hero image, and maybe the paragraph, subheading paragraph. But what they won't be able to do is change the ratio of the image or change that into a video or, bring the header underneath that. That will be kind of locked. And you have different components for different styles that you'll be able to drag and drop in. So that kind of moves Elementor closer to a safer editing model. I think some of the page builder's downfalls is that it's completely open to everyone and you can build anything, which is great from one point of view. But if we're freelancers, developers, and designers, we want a little bit more flexibility control, especially if we're looking after these websites and things like maintenance packages. But this is still early. Version 4 is still beta. And even though these things are nice to have, it still doesn't really replace the need for how we design things today. Even though we can lock down things or say this thing is edible and this thing isn't, we still shouldn't be building complex layouts, that don't need to have that complexity. Keep everything nice and simple. So Elementor version 4, it doesn't remove the need for guardrails. It just kind of more formalizes it in a similar way to Gutenberg editor, the block editor does as well, but not quite as specific. When we hand over to clients, so when it comes to handover, I've covered this previously. I don't explain Elementor. There's hundreds of good YouTube videos out there that'll explain how to edit stuff in Elementor and what all the controls do. So I don't talk about containers. I don't talk about global templates. I don't talk about structure. That stuff's all just built. I just explain how to use them in the site in very, very simple terms. I tell them you can edit text and images freely. If you need more content, duplicate an existing container or page. And if you want something new that's really radically different, just let me know. And we'll work it out and we'll build some new containers, some new layouts, some new page variations for those, just to make my life easier and your life easier. And that's it, really. No long instructions, no detailed walkthroughs of the Elementor UI. It's not really needed because the system is already doing most of the work. And when clients understand the boundaries, they stop experimenting as much and they stay within kind of what's safe. And that's good for us. It's good for them as well. So the difference between a beginner build and a professional one isn't how it looks at launch day. It's how it behaves at handover and the first 6 months and year. So a few weeks later, a few months later, and after the client's been using it to update and change things. Does it stay consistent? Does it still look intentional? Or does it kind of slowly drift to chaos? That's where these decisions really, really matter. So using guardrails instead of relying on instructions, that'd be my way to go. Designing systems instead of just pages, and reducing how often that you have to go back and fix things. Because in the end, it's not really about stopping clients from using their website. It's their website, they can do what they want, but it's about making sure they can use it a little bit more safely without breaking content and breaking that layout. So here at the end, if there's one thing to take away from tonight, it's shift. So we're not just building pages anymore. We shouldn't think of ourselves as page developers, page builders. We should think of ourselves as system designers. So we're designing systems that other people are going to use. And the more freedom that we give them without structure, the more likely things are to break over time. So instead of relying on instructions and telling clients, don't touch this, don't touch these controls, don't move that, or just hoping that clients remember what we showed them when we walked them through on a Zoom or recorded a Loom, we design the site so it guides them. So it's got guardrails with pre-built sections or containers, simple workflows, clear boundaries, so that they can use the site confidently without needing to understand how it was built. Because in the end, it's not really about controlling what the clients do. It's more about making sure the right thing on that page is the easiest thing to do. So good Elementor builds, they don't just look good, they also behave well after handover.